Well, all right. So I just saw Inside Out 2, the, of course, sequel to Inside Out 1, which it has been a minute at this point. Inside Out 2, one of the big stories of it is just how much it's blowing up. Like, it's currently over $1 billion worldwide as of right now, and still has plenty of room to be making more money right here. Disney, of course, made it known that they wanted to make more of an effort making less original content essentially and more sequels and remakes, making more of an effort on that. And this is why they do it, right? Elemental, which was a movie I enjoyed. I know some people are hit or miss on it, but that's a movie that still made its budget back, but is not doing Inside Out 2 numbers. So this is part of why they've made this decision. The creative team behind it, this was Kensley Mann had a writer credit and also directed this movie. First thing she has directed, she has been in the art department on a number of projects in the past, including Lightyear. She was also in the animation department for Onward, and has a writing credit on The Good Dinosaur. So has worked with these Disney, or these Pixar things in the properties in the past. As for the writers, you have Dave Holstein, who has mostly done some like TV stuff, has been more where he's made his money, and then you have Meg LaFouve, is maybe how you say her name, who only a couple of writing credits, but wrote for Captain Marvel, probably the most the biggest name project that she has been a part of. Inside Out 2, the story itself, wasn't sure if I had to go too deep into the plot summary because, you kind of probably get what's going to happen, but I will give it anyway because, maybe you still haven't seen it and want to know what it's about. It's essentially the kind of logical next conclusion, which is that Riley is now entering puberty, which means that there are more emotions that she has, and they're dealing with those new emotions that have emerged once she's gotten to a certain age. Again, obviously, it being a Pixar movie, you're not going to talk about every aspect of puberty, but they talk about the emotional side of things. And I think that the Riley side of things was probably the strongest side of this movie, I would say. I think that all that stuff very much worked. Even when emotions were controlling her, it still felt real and grounded. It never felt like silly. And I do think that that was probably the strong point of this movie. Unfortunately for me, I did feel like this movie dragged a bit throughout, especially in this middle portion. For the Joy's crew in their storyline, essentially there was the Riley's inner self that got moved all the way to the other side of like her brain or whatever it is, like the thing that they're in gets moved all the way to the other side of that, and so because of that they have to go find it, and that's kind of their story, which kind of feels a bit like video gamey. It felt very, yes, it is a MacGuffin. Very much felt like that, though. It just felt like we need to figure out a thing for them to do this movie, so that's what they're doing. It felt like almost like a TV show where it's like, okay, this is just the B plot, except it's, of course, in a movie. Of course, that's totally fine if you can consistently get good scenes throughout, and there were some entertaining scenes that I thought that worked for me, like a sarcasm, which is a silly name, and even the movie points to how silly of a name it is, which I never love. Like, you wrote the joke, just own the joke. You don't have to look to the camera basically and say, really, that's what it's called. But nonetheless, that scene I thought was very funny. I liked the idea of when they were saying something through the sarcasm, then it sounded sarcastic to someone on the other side. So that created a fun dynamic, I thought. There were definitely some very funny comedic scenes here. And I wouldn't say I was ever particularly bored throughout this movie, but I did feel like I just wanted to see more of that, and it kind of felt like, again, very TV, of very just getting from point to point, and just not every scene worked for me. It just didn't. I thought that there were some just kind of blander moments in this. I think the reality is that, this movie does do some things to justify its existence, and we'll get into those when I get to kind of broader strokes towards the end of the movie. So I wouldn't say, it totally shouldn't exist or anything like that, but it just doesn't fully justify its existence in this. I can't fully divorce my feelings on this movie with the kind of, frustrating aspect of the fact that Disney says, you know what, we're not going to make more original movies anymore. We're instead only going to make sequels, and then the sequels are doing way better than the original movies, even though I enjoyed the original movies more than the sequels. That there's going to be that frustration at play, especially when I'm watching the movie and just not really totally feeling like every aspect of this is like, oh yeah, I see why you had. At no point was I like, I see why you had to make this movie. This makes sense. It's not to say you can't make great sequels or great remakes or anything like that. You absolutely can, and Pixar has done it. They've made movies that totally work, that are sequels. It's just I don't think this one was it didn't do a lot for me for about like 40 minutes of this movie, I would say. I also think one of the things that hurt this film for me was the kind of lack of stakes throughout. I mean, you could definitely see why Riley cared so much about doing successful at the hockey practice and the hockey camp that she was at. I could certainly understand why she cared so much. So that part worked. I think just as an audience member, though, you don't care as much because like you kind of know she's gonna be okay either way. Like whether she's successful in the hockey camp or not, she's probably gonna end up all right. So there weren't really stakes for an audience member to feel too invested in, I thought. That being said, one of the things Pixar is known for is its tearjerker moments. It's its finales, how well it typically handles the final act, and this movie was no exception. I thought that the final act was very good. I really enjoyed the dynamic of the anxiety and joy and kind of learning that, hey, it is healthy to have both of these two things, but you can't have an overpowering of one. And one thing I really liked was they showed early on joy was kind of taking over, because I think sometimes you wonder, like, couldn't joy just do everything? Like, isn't it good just to be happy? But like, the answer is not always. The coach is trying to talk, and since joy is taking over, Riley is giggling, which means that coach can't talk, and now everyone's in trouble, right? Like, sometimes you do need to have other emotions take the reins, including anxiety. Just anxiety can't, fully take over. There was a, depiction of a panic attack, which definitely I thought was, handled very maturely, I thought, in this situation. So as a whole, that really worked for me, and kind of, I think that if you want to say, should this movie have existed, I think that's the reason why you ultimately would say yes, is because of how the ending works so well. And I think that's the best part of this movie, and it's something I definitely enjoyed. I don't think I need to get into spoilers too much here, although I did kind of describe some of the stuff, but hopefully that wasn't anything that would ruin your experience if you haven't seen it. There was definitely some really good stuff here. It is certainly one that, if you have kids, yeah, go take your kids to it. You'll enjoy it, and they can get some good stuff out of it. I would absolutely feel like that's the case. It's one that sometimes the plot details feel a bit too convenient for me. Not all the characters felt fully fleshed out because there were so many of them. I'm surprised they didn't cut one of the new emotions or two. The essential second act of this movie really wasn't fantastic for me, and even the first act I wasn't crazy about, but it does save it in the final act, and none of it was boring, none of it was bad. It was just kind of bland throughout a decent chunk of it. So unfortunately, I'm not full of joy after seeing this one, but I'm not full of anger either. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Wasn't my favorite Pixar. And I don't like this new we're only making sequels thing. I just don't. It's not for me. I prefer the original stuff. But I'm alone in that. People like going to see Inside Out too, and I guess I saw it too, but at least I also saw Elemental, right? Like, at least I also saw I'll also go see the other original things like Kinds of Kindness, which I watched. I had a double feature of Inside Out 2 and Kinds of Kindness, which is unique. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on Inside Out 2. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.